how did ancient humans kill boredom? Do you think that boredom is a modern problem that arose with the cell phone, social networks, and the feeling that life should be a sequence of constant stimuli? But what if I told you that boredom could be as old as humanity itself, and that the way our ancestors dealt with it reveals something deep and perhaps terrifying about who we are? Think about it with me for a second. A human being from 100,000 years ago, without agriculture, without city, without screens, only forest, fire, and silence. What was happening inside that person's head when there were no predators to flee from, no food to search for? What has art, religion, war, and the reason why you are watching this video now? Human beings are probably the only animal on Earth that is truly bored. Other animals remain inactive, rest, wait, but human boredom is different. It is accompanied by an acute awareness of time passing, the feeling that something should be happening and is not. Researchers at the University of York call it involuntary temporal awareness, the painful perception that the present is empty. And that, according to them, is exclusively human. But what did ancient humans do with that void? The archaeological evidence tells a story that no one expected to find. In the Lascaux caves in France, paintings made 17,000 years ago show scenes of animals in movement. Perspective on the position of the figures? Symbolism? This is not the job of someone who has just hunted and is in a hurry. This is the job of someone with free time, someone who sat down, looked at the stone wall, and decided to fill the silence with beauty. Rock art, to a large extent, it may have been born of boredom. But that's not the strangest thing. The archaeologists have found objects in Paleolithic sites that serve no practical purpose. Small bone sculptures, polished stones that do not cut, shells with perfect perforations which were clearly used as decorations. Objects created only to exist, only to be observed. Researchers call this symbolic behavior, and most of these objects were found in contexts that suggest one thing: leisure time. And there is more. Studies on hunter-gatherer populations that still exist today, such as the Kung of Namibia or the Hadza of Tanzania, show something surprising. These communities work on average 4 to 5 hours a day to secure food and shelter. The rest of the time is spent in conversation, music, dance, storytelling. Stories, and something that anthropologists describe as elaborate games between adults. They were bored, and they invented things to do. Now comes the strangest part. Some of the inventions created to kill boredom changed the course of civilization. The oldest game known to humanity, Mancala, with versions dating back more than 7,000 years in Africa. Sculpted stone tablets found in Egyptian and Ethiopian sites. A game. Pure entertainment. Born from the boredom of people who had too much time and creative energy to spare. Instrumental music, according to researcher Stephen Mithen from the University of Reading, may have evolved not as communication, not as ritual, but as a way to regulate the internal emotional state during periods of inactivity. In other words, our ancestors played the flute because they were bored and needed to do something with the silence. But this is where the story gets really disturbing. Not all the ways to kill boredom were harmless. Historians and anthropologists have suggested for decades that a significant portion of interpersonal violence in primitive societies occurred during periods of low activity. Not during scarcity, when stress dominated, but during abundance, when there was food, shelter, and time. The human brain, when bored and without a constructive outlet, can begin to seek stimulation in any direction, including conflict. Psychologist John Eastwood of the University of York describes boredom as an aversive state of wanting, but being unable to engage in satisfying mental activity. When that desire is not satisfied, the brain does not turn off. It climbs, it searches, and what it finds depends on the environment around it. This raises an uncomfortable hypothesis that some researchers avoid saying out loud. Could it be that part of our capacity for cruelty, for war, for destruction, is simply the byproduct of a brain designed to never stop, that hates emptiness, and that in the absence of constructive stimuli, finds destructive ones equally satisfying? Modern neuroscience supports, at least partially, this idea. Brain imaging studies show that the human brain, in a state of boredom, presents activation in the same regions associated with physical discomfort. Boredom literally hurts. And just as physical pain forces us to act to eliminate the threat, boredom forces us to act to eliminate the void. What we do with that energy determines who we are. The most accepted theory in evolutionary psychology is that boredom is an adaptive mechanism. It arose to force the organism to leave the state of inertia and search for resources, learn skills, and explore territories. An ancestor who was comfortable with idleness probably died before passing on their genes, so we were selected to feel discomfort with inactivity. We were built to need a purpose. That explains a lot. It explains why children of any culture in the world invent games spontaneously. It explains why isolated populations developed art independently on every continent. It explains why humans built pyramids. They composed symphonies, wrote poetry, and also why they warred, destroyed, and reinvented the world repeatedly. But there is a layer that science has not yet been able to fully explain. If boredom is universal, if it is biological, if it is ancient, why do different cultures respond to it in such radically different ways? Why did some civilizations channel boredom toward spiritual contemplation and others toward territorial conquest? Why do some individuals transform emptiness into art and others into violence? And more importantly, what does that say about the present? You live at a time in human history with more ways to kill boredom than any ancestor could imagine. Streaming, social networks, games, real-time news, food delivery in 30 minutes. And yet rates of chronic boredom, depression, existential emptiness, and sense of purposelessness are among the highest ever registered. Maybe because all these modern solutions do exactly what the old ones did. They fill the void temporarily, but do not resolve the fundamental issue. The human being was not built to not be bored. It was built to transform boredom into something. And when the environment eliminates that need for transformation, when the stimulus comes ready chewed, delivered, something inside the mind begins to slowly rot. Ancient humans killed boredom by creating, painting, playing, telling stories around the fire, sometimes fighting, always searching. The question that remains is not how they did it. The question that remains is, what are you doing with yours? Because the emptiness is still there. It has always been, and it is waiting to see what you are going to build or destroy this time. If you've made it this far, you have an opinion on this. I want to know, do you think boredom is the greatest driver of human creativity or the greatest source of destruction? Write it in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to rethink how they're filling their own time, send them this video right now.